Part 19. The Original Vampire. Author, Ludo Busrud. Chapter 182. Chapter 182 Dinner, Part 2. Blood fog dispersed. Colin returned to his seat. Voila is a third-order knight. According to the experience of Colin's last transformation of Queen Aisha, he first embraced a level that was lower than his own blood, and he should not drop the order. I felt the change of the body quietly, except for some weakness, it did not fall. After a sigh of relief, Colin poured himself a glass of deer blood wine, waiting for Wallah's wake up while drinking. To be honest, Vala's just willingness to be atonement just now has a lot of touch on Colin. Faced with such a knight who persisted injustice in his heart, Colin felt that he had to change his original plan slightly. After a long time, Vala finally woke up just when Colin almost conceived a new plan. I didn't die. Wallah sat straight and looked at the long sword that was still inserted in his chest, his face was blank. You are really dead, Colin said lightly, but, I gave you the second life. Wallah looked at Colin in his eyes. In his eyes, the whole body seemed to be shrouded in a vast and holy and irresistible glory at this time. Impulse. Colin, what's going on? Have you heard of blood angels? Nympho. After some brainwashing, the Vala Cavalier's attitude towards Colin became extremely respectful. I saw that he slowly pulled out the long sword in front of his chest, held his head again, kneeled on one knee, and solemnly vowed loudly. Thank you for the supreme grace given by the adults of God. I, Vala Uman, have been vowed to be loyal to you from then on. I will return to the arms of the Lord from this day. Will is the direction of my sword, and your order is the creed of my action. Colin took Vala's sword and touched his shoulders twice, accepted the other party's loyalty. With the persistence of the Cavalier's Murid, Colin felt that this loyalty may be more closely and reliable than the bond of the blood race. Wallah, do you know why I forgive your sins and give you a second life? Please show it. Because, you are just a poor person who has been covered in the drum. The Wallah Cavaliers suddenly showed their doubts. Colin continued to explain, you said that your mother Penny sent someone to assassinate me is to help you find a family business. Then I ask you, Ms. Penny's relationship with you, there is really such a close relationship? Mother, the Wallah Knights really hesitated. Mother is not a person who is good at expressing her emotions. Colin sneered, not good at expressing feelings. Do you really feel that a mother does not know how to show intimacy in the face of his biological son? Maybe she is a bit resistant to my illegitimate child's identity. Oh, she is not a civilian herself. What qualifications to see low illegitimate children? Even if she really has a resistance to your identity, she is unwilling to get close to you, so why is she still taking such a big risk and help you to win the Angra family business? Wallah did not know what to say now, so he said respectfully, Master of God, please forgive my dullness and cannot see the reason for it. Actually, the real reason is very simple. Colin exuded a faint coercion, and his tone became solemn. Penny is not close to you, just because she was not your biological mother. What? Vala looked up at each other with a glance, watching Colin in unbelievable. Don't forget, I am the apostle of the blood angel. Naturally, I can use divine arts. You are actually the bloodline of the Uman family, and that Lawrence is actually the illegitimate son of Penny and the Count. I am the sister-in-law of my father. Wallah was stupid. Lawrence is the illegitimate child. Colin shaking the wine glass in his hand without continuing, but let Wallah digest this amazing news. The reason why he did not say the hidden inheritance set is because he has not been verified in this world, that he has not been verified at all, or it is still easier for a religious knight. Wallah was in a deep struggle because of the words of Colin. He dared not question the judgment of Colin, but could not understand that if he was really the sister-in-law of the Count Uman, why has been treated as an illegitimate child for so many years. Are you doubtful? Why will you be a sister-in-law as an illegitimate child? Yes, please be a person who chooses to solve me for me. Because Lawrence is an illegitimate child, his blood is more noble than you. How is this possible? Walla was even more puzzled, but then he seemed to understand something, and quickly asked, do you mean that Lawrence's biological mother Penny is not a civilian? Yes, Penny is actually a descendant of the Saint Simon family. Therefore, although Lawrence is an illegitimate child, in the eyes of the Count Uman, it is obviously more noble than you. The Saint Simon family, Walla finally realized that the descendants of a paladin family are naturally much more noble than him. At this time, Walla understood why Penny was always indifferent to him, and there was no closeness and attention that normal mothers should have. After understanding the original committee, the Vala Cavaliers were silent. His face continued to look, and the humiliation of his illegitimate child identity suddenly came into his heart for many years, and finally condensed into a rushing resentment and unwillingness. The corner of the Collin's mouth was slightly bent, and once again, he stirred. Vala, do you know the cuckoo bird? No. Walla nodded and looked gloomy. Rhododendron will give birth to their eggs in the nest of the warblers, letting the birds raise their descendants for them. What will happen to the real descendant of the bird's own? Will be squeezed out of the nest by the hatching, falling alive, starving to death. Walla's face was gloomy as if he could drip water. So, Walla, are you willing to watch the throne that should have belonged to you by Lawrence, so that the Uman family becomes a hotbed of the Saint Simon family's descendants? Of course unwilling. There is also the Earl of the Suduo family, which is your real mother. It is said that she died of infection. Oh, do you believe this reason? Walla's eyes were red instantly, and two words were squeezed out of the bite, don't believe it. And your father, Count Uman, I can tell you for sure, the reason why the giants were able to defeat Marquis in Charles, which led my father to die on the front line, and also caused you to be seriously injured. In fact, it was because of him driven a letter to the giant devil. Moreover, this time, in order to help the San Simon family come back, Count Uman chose to betray his king, betrayed his people, and want to trigger the chaos in the north. In such a person, are you still willing to continue loyalty to him and drive him? Of course unwilling. Walla's fists rolled straight. Huoran looked up and asked sincerely, Master of God, what should I do? Hearing this, Colin's face finally showed a satisfactory smile. This chapter is finished. The Original Vampire. Author, Lugo Busroot. Chapter 183. Chapter 183 Songland Town, Part 1. The winter in the north is always particularly long. By the end of February, there were still no signs of weakening the heavy snow and the whistling cold wind. How many people are looking forward to the spring is completely without a shadow. Benjian City, the gate of the city. Colin, let's get here. Caitlin reached out and hugged his brother, and helped him to ignore the neckline of his shirt, telling, when you are free, you must come to the Eagle City to see me. It must be. Colin nodded with a smile, you must be careful all the way. The Vala Cavaliers gave a gift solemnly at Colin's. Master Viscount is assured that I will guard Caitlin. In addition, those words you explain, I will definitely tell my father in truthfully. Well, be sure to let Master Earl realize my goodwill. The friendship between the Angra family and the Uman family will last forever, Khalil said in a state of trouble. Yes. The two exchanged a look at each other, and finally waved farewell. After sending away the Wallow, Collins had just returned to the Red Castle and had no time to sit down for a while, and saw that the housekeeper Iman hurried over. Master, Songland Town has another letter. Colin frowned, opened the envelope, and looked at it in a hurry, and laughed at his anger. Hey, this Baron Rhonda, he really reluctant. Songland Town is located west of Benjian City and is the territory of Baron Longba. This Baron Roma also asked Colin to buy food, but he was not as good as the young and immature Count Morrison, and bargained with Colin for half a day, making Colin annoyed and scattered. Although he eventually accepted the conditions for the delivery of Chloria in installments, it was obviously dissatisfied with the result. As the news of the sufficient food of Benjian city continued to spread, a large number of slaves in the nearby poured into the Colin's territory, providing a lot of labor for Colin. In contrast, the phenomenon of population loss began to appear around the territory around the Viscounts. At the beginning, it was just a slave, but later, as the famine further deepened, the high price of food made many civilians start to afford food. These civilians who broke food also began to clean up their families and dragged their family to Benjian city. Of course, Colin did not refuse. He knows the importance of the population in this era, and the Benjian city with a large amount of food can continue to receive the flow of flowing into the population. But this obviously made the surrounding lords start in a hurry. However, although they were anxious, they didn't dare to make Clorin easily. After all, the Black Army is in the Benjian city. Although it is only a disabled army, it is still not that the small leaders around them can fight. What's more, Colin has just defeated the well-known Tianmo Legion in the World War I Yunyu city. Such a record has made many people see him as a Marquis of Garcia, another rising north border after him. The star. Of course, there are always some fools in the world who do not know the thickness of the sky. For example, Baron Longba in Songlan town. He has brought many times and questioned why Colin retained his leaders, and even asked Colin to repatriate all the leaders of Songlan town. Such an attitude obviously angered Colin. Throw the letter into the fireplace with hand, and Colin turned back to Yimen. For me a reply to me, tell Baron Longba that I can't recognize which residents in Songlan town. If he wants to return to his leaders, he will come to Benjian city in person. Yes, master. Yimen was ready to retreat, but was stopped by Colin again. Wait, is there no news over the Winter City? No, it is said that the Duke of St. Hilda was injured in the duel with the samurai of the giant empire before. Nowadays, I have not been able to meet the enlightenment of our relatives. Colin sneered, obviously he didn't believe the excuse of the Duke. At this time, he suddenly realized that Baron Longba in Songlan town may be a good opportunity to test the Duke. Thinking of this, there was a trace of cold light in Colin's eyes, and immediately said to Yimen, I wrote a letter to Baron Roma in person. After speaking, he sat down in front of the desk, picked up the goose brush, and wrote a letter. Yimen, who knows Colin's spleen, probably guessed at this time the wording of this reply will not make the Baron Ronda like. Colin has already covered the wax and handed the letter to Yimen, send me to Songlan town. Yes, master. Nympho. 5 days later, the Baron Ronda really came to Benjian in person. At the same time, more than 1,000 soldiers were brought, the murderous look, but laughed at the log knight in the head of the city. Just a little people, who scares, the cavaliers of Log smiled at the sight of her, and then ordered the people to open the gate and welcomed Baron Longba in. Baron Longba is a middle-aged man with a strong shape and rough face. The beard on his face is connected with his hair, which looks like an irritable gorilla. What about Angeli? Baron's voice was very loud, and as soon as he opened his mouth, the snow shocked down on the gate of the city. The Roger Cavaliers perfunctorily gave a gift and replied with a smile, Baron, our vulgarities are waiting for you in the Red Castle. Baron Roma's face was even more gloomy. Apparently, it was dissatisfied with Colin, who did not welcome himself at the gate of the city. However, the title of Colin was higher than him after all, and Baron Longba was hard to say that Colin was rude. Of course, Baron Longba does not have Colin. After all, he is not a co-minister of Colin. Although there is a gap between the two of them, there is no relationship. Following the log to the Red Fort, I saw that Colin had greeted in front of the castle. Baron Roma's face was slightly slower, but it was still the cold attitude. Colin didn't seem to mind the coldness of the other party. He still greeted Baron Longba with a smile, and even pretended to hold the other's arm affectionately and walk to the castle with him. Baron Longba couldn't help but disdain. He hadn't looked down on the rapid rise of Colin, thinking that the other party just followed the jaw of Garcia to walk around the Sky Island and work some contributions. Now that the two sides have a population conflict, Baron Longba is even more unobtrusive. When he came to Binjian City this time, he was iron-hearted to bring all the leaders who belonged to Songlan town. Otherwise, it may be that no one will help him grow the field. Baron Roma was wondering how to speak, and suddenly found that someone behind him was approaching quickly. He turned his head in doubt and saw an armored knight wearing a horse-faced mask rushing towards himself. "There are assassins," Baron Longba screamed immediately, ready to pull the sword to welcome the enemy, but suddenly found that his right arm was clenched tightly by Colin, and he couldn't move. Baron Longba was so frightened that he was frightened and immediately realized that it was a trap. Angle. Without the words, the monster of the horse-face mask had rushed to Baron Longba. The knife flashed, and Baron Longba's head was instantly cut off, but his body stood there, and the blood on the neck sprayed old like a fountain. The guard of the Roma family was shocked by such a change. How could they think that their lords were assassinated at the door of the Red Fort? Until the sharp voice of Colin sounded, "Grasp him, don't let the assassin run away." The guards of the Longba family woke up like the beginning of dreams and chased towards the assassin who had already ran out. The cavaliers of Log looked at the scene with a stunned way, and seemed to understand something, so he asked carefully, "Adult, are we going to chase?" At this time, Colin released Baron's right arm, carefully avoided the blood sprayed from the other's neck, and ordered the order. "Of course you have to chase it. Brunt Roma died in Binjian City, we blame the assassin." This chapter is finished. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Original Vampire. Author, Lugo Busroot. Chapter 184. Chapter 184 Songlan Town, below. Under the cold wind, there are few street pedestrians in Songlan Town. The high price of food has caused the residents of this northern town to continue to lose, which has also led to a more small town that is not considered prosperous. It is said that the grumpy lord has brought more than 1,000 soldiers to Binjian City, and vowed to catch those escaping leaders. However, the leaders have not been caught yet, but the news of a stone is shocked. Lord Songlan Town, Baron Longba died in Binjian City. I do know where this news is spread, but it spreads the whole town at a very fast speed. In just one day, almost everyone in Songlan Town knew the news. But strangely, the people of the Longba family did not come up to confirm the authenticity of the news. Of course, they did not deny it. For a while, the streets and hotels in Songlan Town were discussing this amazing news in the Tavern Hotel. More and more information is gradually disclosed. It is said that the assassination of Baron Roma is an East Knight. And the original goal of the East Cavaliers was actually the lord of the northern border of the Tianma Legion, the Angel Envorce of the Erdree, but the Baron Roma and Angle were accompanied. People. The poor Baron of Roma became a scapegoat of Angelin's age lamb. However, with the help of Angle Line, the assassin was caught. At this time, he was sentenced to hanging, and the corpse was hung on the square of Binjian City for 1 day and 1 night. These noses and eye-catching details have added the authenticity of the news. Most of the residents of Songlan Town have believed that their lords have really encountered misfortunes in Binjian City. Nympho. The night was getting deeper, and the Longba family castle was still brightly lit. A group of members of the family gathered in the hall and were arguing fiercely. Baron Longba's eldest son White Ronda was at this face at the moment when he looked gloomily, and his heart was full of anxiety and boring. The death of his father was caught by White, and he also smelled a strong conspiracy. How could the Eastern assassin suddenly become difficult when his father went to visit Angle Viscount, and he killed the wrong person very coincidentally? But the family knight who returned to the reporter of Songlan Town confirmed the identity of the assassin. It was indeed a knight in the East, and it was also a pretty fourth-order knight. The assassin had participated in the World War I of Union City. The whereabouts of the war were unknown. They did have bloody vengeance with Angle Viscount, and the motivation to assassinate was very sufficient. But White still felt that the death of the Angler V Company and his father couldn't get rid of the department. After all, my father went to Binjian City. In fact, I just wanted to find the trouble of each other. Just when White thought about it, he suddenly heard someone named himself. He looked up, and saw that the housekeeper looked at himself with concern. "Master, are you okay?" "I'm fine." "Master, then you have to make a decision quickly." "What decision?" Everyone looked at White, who was blank, and was a little speechless. The relationship was noisy here for a long time, and the young master didn't listen at all. In the end, the housekeeper said, "Master White, because of the death of the master, the people of Songlan Town, and the elite of the family army are still in Binjian City, so I have found that many people who have stricken their hearts have incite the lack of grain in secret civilians, ready to grab the granary in the town. So, what should we do next? Please make a decision." White's eyebrows twisted even tighter. "I did not expect that the rain leaked overnight." At such a moment, there was a precursor to rebellion in Songlan Town. The previous slave rebellion has been tired of dealing with the Longba family. If there is another civilian riot, and at such a sensitive moment, White is very doubtful whether his family can survive. Notify the whole town, starting tonight, the implementation of a curfew. As soon as White opened his head, he suddenly found that it was suddenly boiling outside the castle, and the light of the sky illuminated the dark night sky, and a shouting of killing broke the quietness of the night. When everyone in the Longba family saw such a situation, they suddenly panicked, and quickly cast the help to White. White was also panicked at this time, but he was still calm and ordered the family knight to call for the army immediately to suppress the rebellion. At this time, the Pine Forest town has indeed become a pot of porridge. All kinds of rumors do not know where to start, but it seems that the plague quickly spreads. It is said that the Longba family is going to carry the last grain in the town. It is also said that the trolls are about to invade again, and this year's spring plowing has not been expected. It is also said that when Baron Longba went to Binjian City, he took away all the elite of the family army. At this time, the troops in Songlan Town were empty. Panic, anxious, and greedy emotions have continued to spread, causing all the residents of all the lack of grain in the town to move. I do know who shouted the first sound and ignited the first fire, but soon, the fire swept the entire Songlan town with the trend of Lagihara. Riot, triggered. Nympho. When Chen 11's micro-light dispels the dense fog in the wild, an army is slowly moving towards Songlan town. Master Viscount, not far ahead is Songlan town. You really don't need to continue sending it again. We can escort the body of the Baron to return. The Mark Knight persuaded Colin respectfully. The Knight of the Roma family was alert to the young leaders of Binjian City. He also felt that the death of the Baron was very strange. "Hey, Baron Longba died in Binjian City. I always have the responsibility that I can't shirk, so let me send his body to Songlan town. Moreover, recently the rebellion in the north is frequent. Mark Knight's heart, the biggest accident has happened in your Binjian City." But in the face of the powerful Angle Viscount, he still couldn't change anything, so he had to worry about it in his heart and moved silently to Songlan town. After another for a while, a whistle returned to Hui report, "Master Viscount, the light of the Pine Forest town in front of the vassal, seemed to have a rebellion." "What?" The Mark Cavaliers were still shocked, but the Colin over there had been decisively issued. "Pass our military order, speed up travel, and enter the town to chaos. Master Viscount should be just a small-scale slave rebellion. Our Longba family can deal with it by ourselves, so don't bother you." The Mark Cavaliers still didn't want to let the Angle family's army enter Songlan town, but Colin ignored him at all and still issued an order. "Mark Knight, don't have to see it the same as the Duke of St. Hilda, we should be a watch to help, the Black Army, Attack. With the order, the Black Army, which had long been waiting for, immediately accelerated the crowd of Songlan town. The Mark Knight looked at the long-distance cavalry, and the anxiety in his heart was extremely strong. This chapter is finished. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 185. Chapter 185. In Songlan town, the rebellion has not completely subsided. However, under the suppression of the Longbow family army, the rebels of the rebels have been completely suppressed. According to this trend, it is estimated that it won't be long before this rebellion will be completely calmed. Some rebellious civilians also saw that the situation was not good, and when they saw that the enemy's army could not be rushed towards the gate of the city, they were going to take the property and food that they were snatched overnight to escape from Songlan town. Seeing this, the Longbow family army did not stop it. They are now insufficient for their troops. The primary task is to stabilize the situation in the town. It is difficult for those who escaped the rebels to take care of them, and after these people escape, they can reduce their pressure. But just as the rebels successfully opened the gate of Zhendong to rush out, they suddenly heard the sound of low horn came from the distance. Later, the sound of horseshoes rolled like a thunder, trembling the earth in Songlan town, and the Black Cavalry army instantly filled the wilderness outside the town. How did those rebels have seen such a magnificent cavalry charge, and they were frightened to escape back to the town? Compared with those fierce cavalry, the army of the Longbow family was completely a group of harmless people and animals. Sheep. Essence. The Black Riding Army's order of Feng Angeli, come to assist in the rebellion. The Log Cavaliers who rushed outside Songlan town roared, regardless of whether the Longbow family was willing to accept their assistance, and directly led the Black crushed cavalry forces, and the arrows generally rushed into the town. The subsequent situation is naturally good. Even the rebels that could not be able to fight against the Longbow family. At this time, in the face of the more terrible Black Army, there was only the kneeling to surrender. But the arrival of the Black Army made people from the Longbow family worry. They don't believe that the Black Cavalry will come to help them. Chaotic. Moreover, the time to arrive in the Black Army is too coincidentally. Just like Baron Roma's assassination in Binjian City, it is full of various coincidences. But once there are more, it is difficult to believe that this is not a conspiracy, that someone who is a careless person behind. When Colin entered the town of Songlan, the rebellion in the town had basically subsided. The Roma family greeted the strong young dweller into their castle. "Master Viscount, thank you for your helping hand that extended this time. The Longbow family will always be grateful." White followed behind Colin, respectfully, and thanked him respectfully. Those black troops like a tiger made him feel a strong threat, so even if he was full of doubt about the Angle Viscount, White did not dare to reveal it. "White Cavaliers, don't have to be so polite. For your father's death, I also have the responsibility of protecting bad protection. Therefore, this time to help Ping Shaitan can be regarded as my apology for the Longbow family." Colin was polite, but after entering the castle hall, he sat in the main position without letting him go. White was smoked at the corner of his mouth, but he didn't dare to say much. The housekeeper of the Longbow family carefully, tentatively, "Master Viscount, I don't know if you are going to take a few days in Songlan town. We can arrange for your reception for you." "Don't arrange anything." Colin waved his hand with a smile. "I'm leaving today." White's eyes lighted up, and suddenly felt that he might have misunderstood the Angle Viscount. But the next second, he immediately dispelled this naive idea, because Colin continued. "However, the Log Knights will stay, and the Black Cavalry will also leave a part to prevent Songlan town from rebelled again." "Master Viscount, your good intentions, we have received it, but guarding Songlan town is the responsibility of the Longbow family. We also have the ability to bear it alone, no need to." "White Cavaliers," Colin interrupted White's push, "aren't you still lords in Songlan town?" Really not. Although White is the eldest son of Baron Roma and the first heir of the Baron Jaw, Before he was sealed by the Duke of St. Hilda, strictly speaking, he could not be regarded as the Lord of Songland Town. Colin stood up with both hands and said, "Therefore, your primary task is to go to the Winter City to accept the blockbuster of the Duke of the North, instead of boasting with me here, saying that you have the ability to protect Songland Town. I don't question your ability, but to question your qualifications." White opened his mouth and just wanted to justify it, but Colin did not give him this opportunity at all, and once again used the aggressive tone. "Moreover, the White Cavaliers, if I have not led the army to help the Longbow family in chaos this time, it may not be necessarily that you can keep Songland Town. According to the Lord's Lord, if you lose Songland Town, what qualifications do you have to inherit your father's title?" This time, White couldn't help it anymore, and explained loudly, "Master Viscount, you can't question the ability of the Longbow family like this. Even if there is no help of the Black Army, we can keep the Pine Forest Town. As for whether I am qualified to inherit the Baron, the position is also determined by the Duke of the North." Colin waved his hand with a smile, signaled that White didn't have to be excited, and said frankly, "So I said, your first task is to go to the Winter City to meet the Duke belonging. Since you have no intention of occupying Songland Town, please take your army away. White Cavaliers, you are too careful. The reason why I leave the army is to help you hold Songland Town. Don't be busy to refuse. Do you need to escort the family and army when you go to the Winter City? The northern border is not too flat. If you take away the family army, don't you worry that the rebellion in Songland Town is reunited?" White was speechless, and seemed to feel a little reasonable. Seeing this, the old housekeeper of the Longbow family stood up and said, "Master Viscount, thank you for your kindness, but our Longbow family is reluctant to owe too many people, so we better sign an agreement to determine your assistance guarding the conditions and remuneration of Songland Town." White then reacted and nodded again and again, "Yes, Master Viscount, let's sign an agreement." Colin laughed and looked through the plan of the Longbow family at a glance. They are going to put the conditions of the Guardian Joint Defense on the paper. In this way, Colin is not good at the map of Songland Town. However, what the Longbow family didn't know was that Colin had no intention of occupying the town. Yes, however, as a removal of troops and remunerations to help maintain stability, I need the right to harvest in Balin District, Songland Town. 10 years, White screamed, shook his head again and again, "It's too long, Master Viscount, give you a maximum of 3 years of rationing rights." The Genbei Forest District of Songland Town can be said to be a cash cow of the Longbow family. The red pine tree produced there can not only be used as an excellent building wood, but also a kind of pine fat produced, but also extremely expensive medicinal materials. White Cavaliers, before you accept the Duke's book, before becoming a Lord of Songland Town, you are not qualified to bargain with me. The current Songland Town will be temporarily guarded by the Angra family for the time being. White has endured the humiliation and anger in his heart, and had to bow his head. "Okay, then trouble you, the V penalty, I will set off to the Winter City and meet the Duke." Colin showed a satisfactory smile. Eyes through the people of the Longbow family, looked at the direction of the Winter City, and secretly said, "Duke of St. Hilda, you should come out to meet this time." This chapter is finished. The Original Vampire. Author, Ludo Busroot. Chapter 186. Chapter 186. The castle of the Uman family is located in the northwest of the Falling Eagle City, occupying a large area of land. Unlike ordinary aristocratic castles, there are no exquisite gardens or unique buildings in this castle. Instead, they are filled with crops and fruit trees on the open space around the castle. The castle is built with solid but slightly rustic lands. The shape is simple and there is no extra decoration, but the space is used to the extreme. Among the universal pursuit of elegant and luxurious nobles, the Uman family, who advocates frugal and practical, is actually an alien. This kind of atmosphere is said to be the sixth-order soldier who married the Earl of the Earl that year brought into the Uman family, but it has been inherited so far. This generation of Earlwomen especially agrees with this tradition and is not ashamed. Instead, he proudly declared, "When you have a higher spiritual pursuit, material enjoyment is not worth mentioning." However, the Count Uman seems to have no accomplishment in art, so he doesn't know what he said the spiritual pursuit refers to. In the evening, a team slowly entered the castle. The guards of the Uman family did not step forward, but did not go to welcome. Because they knew that this was the king of the Earl's illegitimate son, the Vala Cavaliers returned. The Walla Cavaliers seemed to get used to the indifferent attitude of the guards. After entering the castle, she helped Caitlin out of the carriage. After sending Caitlin back to the room, Vala walked towards the restaurant. He knew that at this time, his father was likely to be dining. The tradition of the Uman family is to finish dinner before the sun falls, because this can save a section of candles. Sure enough, Walla saw MS Pani in the restaurant, and the couple of the Count. The two were sitting on a long table to enjoy dinner. In the past, when Walla saw such a scene, they always became a faint warmth in their hearts. They felt that their father really loved his mother, and he was willing to let a civilian woman and he is at the same table. But now, Walla can only feel the anger of deep bone marrow. The story of the cuckooing bird, that the cuckooing bird occupied the bird's occupation, was once again appeared in Walla's heart, making him almost out of mind. Father, mother, forcibly suppressing his inner anger, Valt raised his face to give greetings as usual. At this time, Count Uman had finished dining, and the attendant immediately stepped forward to remove the tableware on the table. "Is the trip to Binjian City smooth?" Earl wiped his mouth with a napkin and asked. "Everything goes smoothly, Angle Viscount entertains us enthusiastically." "Well, what is the current situation of Binjian City?" "Bingjing find." Count Uman chewed the brief evaluation given by Vala, and frowned slightly. "Then do you understand the tendency of the Viscount Angle?" "Yes," Walla said firmly, "I am convinced that if the rebellion broke out in the north, Angle Viscount will definitely stand on our side." "Oh, why are you so sure?" Count Uman's brows picked. "Originally, the Viscount Angle was worried about the Duke of St. Hills, who married Miss Villa to Prince Tupi, and in Union City, he found that the Duke actually tried to assassinate Vera and let Vera die to death become an excuse for the military involvement in the semi-elf kingdom in the northern border. This also made the Angle, who loved Miss Vera, completely disappointed with the Duke of St. Hilda and even resentful. When I heard Walla said that when the Duke was trying to assassinate Vera, the Earl's eyes flashed slightly, but soon asked as usual again. So, Vera chose to stay in Union City instead of returning to the north because of resentment against the Duke of St. Hilda. Yes. Earl Uman nodded, seemed to recognize the judgment of the Vala Knight. Then he remembered what, and asked again, "By the way, you haven't dined yet?" "No, Caitlin is still waiting for me in the room. I will dine with her later." "Okay, then you go, remember to finish eating before dark." "Yes." Walla once again salute the Count Uman and Penny, and then left. Until Walla's figure disappeared outside the hall, his biological mother Ms. Penny did not take the initiative to say a word to him. "Do you think the Viscount Angeli is possibly pushed?" Penny put down the knife and fork in her hand and finally opened. Earl Moomin slowly shook his head. "Since the failed assassination of a year ago, the Angle family has not been with us." "Do you think he knows the assassin we sent?" "It should be guessed." Earl Uman's eyes were deep. "From a series of incidents in Union City, this Colin Angle is a very clever person." Penny hummed and complained. "You shouldn't have an exterior branch at first, and go to the title of the Angra family. You are already very good to the illegitimate child of Vala first, let him accept baptism as a knight, and help him marry a noble lady." The guilt in the eyes of the Count Uman passed by, but did not justify anything, and asked, "Since the Angra family is difficult to draw, How do your brother prepare to deal with them? Pani hesitated, but shook his head. I don't know, my brother didn't tell me. Earl Mumin was calm, but an unspeakable anger burst into his heart. He knew that he was no longer trusted. 1 year ago in the northern border, the behavior of both ends of his first mouse had aroused the vigilance of the Saint Simon family. This time, the other party was obviously guarding him. Seeing the silent husband, Penny smiled and said warmly, "You don't have to worry, spring is coming, and the layout of his elder brother in the north has achieved the general situation." "Where is your brother now?" "He is in Yulong City." Count Uman frowned, but did not ask what Penny did in the capital of the glorious empire. Because he knew that even if he asked, Penny would not tell the truth. Then there is no need to discuss it. In fact, for this rebellion, Count Uman's heart was a little bit bottomless. Many plans of the San Sima family began to hide him. This feeling of being unclear made Earl Mang is very anxious. Moreover, he knew his Duke of St. Hilda, who had been in charge of the northern border for more than 30 years, and knew that the other party was not a role that could easily deal with it. What's more, the Duke's still hidden strength. A paladin is enough to suppress one. Although the Saint Sima family invited the holy worth of the giant demon empire and hit the Duke of St. Hilda, the Duke of the northern border was how many injuries were, and no one knew. Penny seemed to see the worry of men, and said with a smile, "The repair project of the wallet wall of the Eagle City has been completed. I was thinking that there is still a surplus in the building materials one time." "Well, you have arranged this by yourself," Earl Uman responded casually, and then stood up. "I went to the study." "Okay." Penny smiled slightly, stood up, and at the same time looked up, as if waiting for the man's kiss. But Earl Mumin seemed to have not noticed the hint of his lover at all, and went straight out. This chapter is finished. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 187. Chapter 187 Royal Dragon City, Part 1. As one of the oldest cities on this continent, the establishment of Yulong City is far before the glorious empire. Its history dates back to 7,000 years ago. At that time, the dragon was not extinct, and the High Elves had never disappeared. These two powerful races were also the master of the world at that time. However, the mountain is difficult to accommodate the two tigers, and the war between the dragons and the elves is also the main theme of that era. In the early days of the war, the dragon clan stabilized the elves with a stronger individual strength. However, as the war continues, the number of dragons is scarce, and the weakness of difficulty in reproduction has gradually exposed. The elves began to occupy the upper hand and gradually drove the dragon out of the center of the mainland. Subsequently, the Elf Empire was established, and the Royal Dragon City was the capital of the Elf Empire at the time. The name of the city is naturally deliberately arranged by the Elf clan to humiliate the dragon. The so-called royal means to control and dominate. Because of this, the Royal Dragon City has become a thorns in the eyes of the dragon family since the establishment of it. The countless angry dragons in history have tried to burn it into a flat ground with dragon inflammation, but no exception has not succeeded. The stars move, the vicissitudes of the sea, the dragon, and the high elves have disappeared in the world. Yulong City, the most dazzling stage in the center of the mainland, and now it has been replaced with a new protagonist. There are no buildings left by the elves in the current Royal Dragon City. The long river of time can wash all traces. Human beings have engraved their own imprints in this place for more than 1,000 years. In the bones of the city. But only the palace is an exception. The palace called Phoenix Palace is the only building left by the elves. The rulers of the High Elves are called Phoenix King, and this palace is his former palace. Due to the hard work of the best architectural masters of the elf clan, this beautiful palace has been retained so far, and even the beauty of the St. Lorenzo has been shown by it. Conquering, willing to use it as the palace of the glorious empire. Phoenix Palace is located in the center of Yulongcheng. It is a palace group composed of hundreds of palaces. The high dome of the main hall is flawless, which is a whole piece of white jade inlaid dome. Even in the night without moonlight, it will emit a cold glory. The wall of the palace is inlaid with a light blue frosted marble porcelain, which looks strange in the sun. Hundreds of carved clouds with rose patterns support high roofs, and the inner walls of the roof are painted with a variety of murals. The wide windows are neatly arranged with small and round girl sculptures, each of which has different shapes, and they are stingy. For thousands of years, the king of the king's accumulation has exuded a strong compression of the entire main hall, which made the people who entered it involuntarily wanted to worship. However, just in such a solemn palace, at this time, there was a sudden voice. A waiter walked in front of the temple, and immediately stopped the pace, smiled bitterly, and waited quietly in the cold wind. However, the panting sound in the hall continued to drill into the ears of the waiter, making him hot. But when the bitter cold wind was blowing, he immediately woke up and quickly covered his ears with his hands until he could no longer hear the movement in the temple. For a long time, the door of the temple finally opened and walked out of a lady with a sloppy and beautiful appearance. The waiter quickly lowered his hands and bowed himself. When the lady saw the waiter who was shaking in the cold wind, she smiled at him with a charming, "Yeah, are you overheating?" After speaking, without waiting for the waiter to answer, he left with a smile. The waiter lowered his head from beginning to end and did not dare to see the lady at all, but the familiar voice still made him distinguish the identity of the other person, that was Lady Grandi. However, the waiter was not too surprised. After all, Her Majesty's love for the habit of wearing a green hat for the courtiers was not a secret in the imperial aristocracy circle. The nobles of Yulong City have long been accustomed to this, and even evolved. If there is no green on the head, I am embarrassed to claim to be the real emperor nobles. The waiter slowly entered the hall, and he bowed meticulously, and he couldn't dare to show any emotions on his face. His Majesty the Emperor of the Glory Empire was Reinhard San Lorenzo, which was also respected as the Emperor Reinhard. The Emperor Reinhard is a burly middle-aged man, with blonde hair and a strong sword eyebrow, coupled with the unique eagle hook nose of the St. Lorenzo family. It feels imposing at a glance. It's just that his dress at this time is too casual, wearing only thin shirts. The front chest is still open, revealing a thick and golden chest hair. Feel cold. Your Majesty, the messenger of the Kingdom of Entry will arrive in Yulong City tomorrow morning. Do you have to meet in person? The Emperor Reinhard picked up the high wine glass on the table and poured all the red wine inside into his mouth. He still seemed to feel thirsty, so he filled himself a glass and drank it. He hit a wine hiccup invisibly, and Emperor Reinhard glanced at the waiter and asked in a moody tone, "Didn't you say it before? Let the Queen see it?" The waiter carefully replied, "Your Majesty, it is His Royal Highness who asked me to ask you. She hopes you." Emperor Reinhard waved impatiently, "A messenger of the King of Earth, just go to see the Queen, what else? The Prime Minister hopes that you can attend tomorrow's imperial meeting, saying that spring plowing is right, you need you." The Emperor Reinhard was even more impatient. "The Prime Minister of the imperial meeting is just presided over, I still have something else." The waiter Ñoño said it was, and then carefully said, "Your Majesty, 3 days later is the birthday of Prince Laosi, and His Royal Highness asked me to ask you that the birthday banquet of the prince was still held in the banquet hall of the Phoenix Palace like in previous years." Hearing this, Emperor Reinhard was silent. The waiter, who hadn't received a response for a long time, looked up secretly, but saw the cold eyes of the great. The waiter shook his head and quickly lowered his head again, and he was annoyed in his heart. Why did he dare to look up just now? The atmosphere in the hall seemed to be stagnant for a moment. I don't know how long it has been, almost all the cold sweats of the waiter have wet their clothes, and finally heard the sound of Ledhart's flatness. Well, as in previous years. Yes, His Majesty the waiter was relieved, and he quickly retired from the courtesy. The heavy temple door opened and closed, and was alit the world of snow and snow. The Emperor Reinhard picked up the wine glass again and started to drink himself. There is a decadent atmosphere and a faint resentment in the hall. Suddenly, Emperor Reinhardt's eyes condensed, and he turned his head and looked behind him. The golden curtain moved without wind, and a man covering the black mage robe appeared there. It was just that his neck was against a sharp sword. But the man seemed to be unsatisfactory about such a threat, and he still laughed at the Emperor Reinhardt. His Majesty, when is Prince Rich qualified to host a birthday party in the Phoenix Palace? This chapter is finished. The Original Vampire. Author, Lugo Busrud. Chapter 188. Chapter 188 Royal Dragon City, below. Sorry His Majesty, accidentally let him slip into the palace and disturb you. The sword-holding knight bowed slightly towards the Emperor Reinhardt and apologized. The Emperor Reinhardt watched the incorporate by his guardian knight, and waved his hand with a smile. It's okay, you go down. The guard knight was a little hesitant, but the break in the mage robe said, Your Majesty is a 6th order knight. Is this a close distance, afraid of me a mage? This is the fact that the mage is absolutely windy in the duel with the cavaliers, especially when the distance between the two sides is close enough. If the mage who broke into the Phoenix Palace wants to be unfavorable to the Emperor Reinhard at such a close distance, I am afraid that the first syllable of his spell will just be exported, and the head will be twisted by the Emperor of the 6th order knight. Essence. Huh, the guard knight glanced at the break-in fiercely, and then retracted the sword. I heard that they all called you Mr. Emperor Reinhardt poured himself a glass of red wine and looked at the mage on the opposite side with a smile. But just one title, Your Majesty. You can call you what you want. Mr. Yan put down his hood and revealed a slightly pale and full-fledged face. He walked in front of Emperor Reinhardt, respectfully. The Emperor Reinhardt watched the other party's impeccable palace ceremony and laughed. It's been more than 300 years. Of course, remember, Mr. Yan said, dare to mention his surname if you forget the etiquette. What is the difference between our family and those masterly civilians? Oh, the grievance is very heavy. Emperor Reinhardt played. Don't dare, His Majesty. Our Saint Simon will always abide by the duty of the minister. Unlike some people, we are proud and forget the shadows, and take the favor of His Majesty as the capital of UEU. This division, the Emperor Reinhardt seemed to hear some big jokes. When your family's judge pierced the long sword into the Black Emperor, did you also abide by this score? Her Majesty, no matter how pure the bloodlines, there will be a black alien. You cannot ignore the loyalty of the Saint Sima family for thousands of years because of the betrayal of the judge. Just as because of the loyalty of Prince Laotian, the St. Lorenzo family as a knight model is denied. Seeing that Mr. Reinhardt always led the topic to Prince Laosh, he couldn't help but laughed. Prince Lake is my uncle, and he is also a powerful paladin. His Majesty, if you want to be a model of the cavaliers, it depends not only on strength, but also more important virtues. Prince Laosh's strength is naturally unquestionable, but as the side of the St. Lorenzo family, he is petting and arrogant. He has repeatedly occupied the banquet hall of the Phoenix Palace to host a birthday celebration. Mr., you rushed to the Phoenix Palace to see me with such a big risk, just to stir up the relationship between me and Prince Rich, Bar. Faced with the ridicule of Emperor Reinhardt, Mr. Yan was still an unhappy attitude, as if there was nothing in the world that could move him. Only listening to him shook his head. No, Your Majesty, I am actually for the north. North border, I heard that you have made a big battle in the north. I still united the giants. Why do you really think I can't kill your traitor of your family? His Majesty, please don't get angry. First, if you think about it, in the Gulf's empire for so many years, is the strength of the giant devil growing or weakening? Emperor Reinhardt shook the red wine glass in his hand and sneered disdain. What, do you want to take the credit of the Marquis of Garcia on your head? No, His Majesty, I don't mean that to be a barrier in the north of the empire. Of course, the San Hilda family is well deserved. I dare not work. I just want to tell you that the giant is just a knife in my hand. I have no feelings for them, and I have no loyalty. Then who is the knife in your hand? The San Hilda family, Mr. said without hesitation. The Emperor Reinhardt did not show an unexpected expression, apparently knew it. So, what are you looking for me? I want to invite you not to intervene in the upcoming war in the north. Ha ha ha, Emperor Reinhardt suddenly laughed. Are you forgotten, the Duke of St. Hilda is the elder brother of the Queen. Why do you think I will sit at you as a former betrayer of you descendants of stealing the northern border? Faced with the doubts of Emperor Reinhardt, Mr. Tan seemed to have a bamboo. I saw that he slowly took a scroll from the wide mage robe and handed him respectfully to the Emperor. The Emperor Reinhardt showed a little doubt, but he took it by himself. Open it, the scroll is full of dense elf text. The Emperor Reinhardt, of course, could understand the elf text, but the more he looked, the tighter his brows. Mr. 11 stood up and waited quietly. There is only a smooth breathing sound in the hall. In fact, there are not many content in the scroll, but at this view of Emperor Reinhardt, it is half an hour. When he raised his head again, the lightness on his face disappeared, and his tone became solemn. How can you convince me that it can succeed? Mr. 11 bowed again and said lightly, I will show you in the north, just ask you to give me this opportunity. Moreover, I always think that Prince Rich is not qualified to host a birthday party in the Phoenix Palace. This time the Emperor Ledhart didn't speak, and after groaning for a long time, he finally nodded. Okay, I'll give you a chance. Thank you, Her Majesty. Mr. Yan's thin face finally showed a smile. How many people have seen this scroll? Including you, 3 people. The Emperor Reinhardt narrowed his eyes, and his sharp eyes were full of fear. Who else besides you and me? Mr. Yan closed his mouth without talking. The atmosphere in the temple became more and more naked, and the heat waves visible to the naked eye were steaming in the air. The eyes of Emperor Reinhardt had become golden yellow, and countless small golden lines climbed his face, as if wearing a golden mask for him. The invisible coercion is filled with the temple, making people breathe completely. Mr. seems to be like a small boat in the stormy waves, and it seems that it may be torn into fragments by this violent storm at any time. But his look was still indifferent, and the threat to Emperor Reinhardt turned a blind eye. I don't know how long, the storm suddenly calmed down. The golden light quietly faded, and Emperor Reinhardt restored the original lazy gesture, as if everything just now was an illusion. Okay, Mr. I will give you a chance at this time. I hope you can prove to me with the fact that you are qualified to become the master of the new northern border. Mr. Yan had a breath. Apparently, he was not as easy as he showed it just now. Thank you, Majesty. This chapter is finished. The Original Vampire. Author, Ludo Busroot. Chapter 189. Chapter 189 Messenger and Aid. Austin, why did you come so far? I thought you didn't want to redeem Marquis Woodson in the east. Colin leaned lazily on the lounge chair, squinting and looking at the vacuous of Austin in front of him. Xiao Bai curled up on his leg, as if a blue sea cucumber, sleeping sweetly. Sorry, Master Viscount, because of some things, so delay. Austin's face was a little embarrassed, but he was not embarrassed to say why he was delayed so far. The reason why he rushed to Binjian City is now because he missed the chaos in the north, and he also overestimated the combat effectiveness of his own guards. Originally before the Winter Festival, Viscount Austin marched to Binjian City on the order of the Duke of East, but after entering the north, he discovered that he had less guards. After a few days before the scalp, the guards of more than 100 people brought by Viscount Austin lost heavy losses, and those hungry slave mobs would not attack his team. Coupled with the unfamiliar life, the Austonon's shadow of Benjian City did not see it, so he found that his guards were almost close to collapse under the endless rebels. In desperation, he had to return to the army. After returning, he was naturally scolded by the Duke of the East, and even cut a rib. After a while of rest at home, Viscount Austin took the guard and embarked on the journey of Benjian City for the second time. This time, he finally arrived smoothly. Of course, the hardships on the way are naturally indispensable, but the Viscount Austin will definitely not tell Colin. After all, it really has the face that damages the nobility of the East. So, what do the Duke of St Plus think of my proposal? The Duke agrees with your proposal and is willing to exchange John of Waxason with Marquis of Garcia. What about time and place? If you have no opinion, 1 month later, we exchanged prisoners of war on the banks of Nushui River. Austin took out a simple map that had been marked and handed it to Colin. I have no opinion in the location. Colin looked at the mark on the map and said, but time, changed to 3 months later. Okay, now the northern border is indeed a bit unrestrained, then 3 months later, I will report to the Duke of the Duke. If he has no opinion, then set it. The two did not mention 2 prisoners of war from the 2 marquis from beginning to end, because they all knew that there were no other prisoners of war. In the First World War of the Shadow Canyon, except for the 8,000 disabled army and the captured Marquis captured under the leadership of the Log Knight, all the remaining Black Army soldiers had died and were spared. Similarly, after the First War of Union City, Colin was also voted for the Peach to execute all the prisoners of war in the Mama Legion. A confrontation between the North and the East after a long time, it can be said that it is a defeat. Perhaps this is exactly the result that the St. Simon family who hid in the dark most hopes to see. Not long after the Viscount Austin left, the butler Iman came to report, Master, the reinforcement of the half-elf kingdom is almost coming. Colin stood up from his seat excitedly and laughed, oh, go with me to welcome. In order to cope with the upcoming storm in the north, Colin wrote to Queen Aisha last month and asked her to send a Union Guard to Benjian City to support. Queen Aisha, of course, would not refuse the request of Colin, and issued an order to send troops on the day of receiving the letter. When Collins led the Raydig Knight and others to the city, they saw a silver grey thin line at the horizon east of Benjian City. Over time, this thin line gradually spread, and eventually covered the wilderness in the eastern suburbs of Benjian City. The bright red thorns flag rang under the cold wind. It was the badge of the Miller family and the new symbol of the semi-elf royal family. Colin frowned slightly, thinking Queen Aisha wouldn't he come in person? Although Aisha comes, it will definitely become a great help of Colin, but he hopes that the other party can stay in Union City to raise his fetus. Under Colin's gaze, a team of cavalry protruded from the Silver Moon Guard and quickly rushed towards Benjian City. When they arrived under Benjian City, the gate of the city just opened, and a team of black rides greeted. The head of the semi-elf headed immediately turned around, kneeling on one knee, and said loudly, Dear Master Angeli, the order of Her Majesty, the warriors of the 30,000 Union Guards, let you go here to drive you. Duke Maedwin, welcome to Benjian City. When Colin saw William Maedwin, he was a little surprised, but soon he understood the intention of Queen Aisha's arrangement. It is really a good idea to make this former prince of the elf as the Union Guard. At present, the middle-level generals of the Union Guard are basically people of the Miller family. When Queen Aisha is pregnant and cannot come, if you send another Miller family as a commander, then he may not be wholeheartedly. Follow the Colin's order. Especially when the Colin needs the Union Guard to make a certain sacrifice. And Duke of Maedwin is different. This is an honest person, which is easy to control. What's more, in the case of the Miller family in the middle of the Union Guard, if Duke Maedwin does not want to be overhead, it must be supported by Colin. In this way, this silver lunar guard is more convenient to be completely controlled by Colin. Duke Maedwin followed Colin into the city and went all the way to the Red Castle. At the same time, he also reported the situation of the reinforcements. Master Viscount, this time I brought a total of 30,000 silver moon guards, including 10,000 archers, long gunmen 7,000, 8,000 sword shield soldiers, 2,000 shield soldiers, and 3,000 light cavalry. In addition, 38 knights and 15 ranger came with the army. Well, very good. Khalil nodded with satisfaction. With the assistance of the Silver Moon Guard, his current confidence was even more sufficient. The 3,000 light cavalry was incorporated into the Black Army, and the Log Knight was commanded unified. Yes, adults, in the face of Colin's first order, Duke Maedwin responded at all. Even if this command is obviously an invasion of the cavalry forces who swallowed the Silver Moon Guard. His Majesty and Miss Villa are okay. Your Majesty is healthy. As for Miss Willa, Duke Maedwin suddenly turned to look at a servant behind him. Colin also turned his head in doubt, but saw the servant slowly remove the helmet, revealing a beautiful smile. It is Vera. Vera, how do you run? Before Khalil's words were finished, Vera rushed into his arms like milk and returned to the nest. Feeling the soft touch and familiar fragrance, Colin smiled and said, "You have to come to Bingian City, why don't you tell me in advance?" Wyra buried her head in Colin's arms and said dully, "Don't you welcome me?" "Of course not." Colin haha laughed, "the door of the Red Castle is always open to you." Seeing this, the Duke Maedwin and others quietly retreated a distance, let the two lovers who had reunited for a long time to love each other. This chapter is finished. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Original Vampire. Author, Ludo Busroot. Chapter 190. Chapter 190 Street Stroll. In the early morning, Colin woke up from his dream. The fireplace was still burning, and the crackling sound was made. There are still girls' body temperature and fragrance on the bed, but she is gone. Good morning, Clorin. Colin sat up and saw that Vera was sitting next to the dressing table in front of the window. The most gorgeous flower of the St. Hilda family had changed a bright yellow hook flower dress, and was put on the mirror to put the rose gold ornaments on his forehead. Good morning, Vera. Colin looked at Vera not far away with appreciation. In his opinion, he did not see it for many days. The former girl seemed to be mature a lot. Ian's pure eyes gu pan shenjun, the makeup on his face is more gorgeous and charming than usual, and the bright red lip gloss makes the perfect outline look more three-dimensional. Although there is still a kind of shyness of a choo-choo girl, but more it is a generous elegance and solemnity, and the charming style that is gradually blooming. Is it good? Wyra finished dressing up, turned around, and smiled towards Colin. The sunlight outside the window was very good. The light shot in, sprinkled on the girl's body, reflecting the looming halo. Of course, your beauty will make the warm sun in winter barely. Colin smiled and worshipped a fart. Vera turned a lovely white eyes, and seemed to feel that Colin's praise was too exaggerated. This is the Queen Aisha taught me. The girl carried a skirt and made a circle in place. Colin said secretly that he felt that this dress was a bit familiar, and it was not Vera's consistent style. It seems that you have learned a lot during this time in Union City. Yes, and Queen Aisha also told me about her past. After listening, I realized that in fact, she was very lucky than her. Speaking of which, Vera facing Colin with his hands and signaled him to hug her. Colin smiled forward, holding the young girl into his arms across the thin long skirt. At this time, he understood that Vera could come out of the shadow before, and I am afraid that thanks to Queen Aisha's persuasion. It's a kind of intimate lover. I have sent someone to the Winter City to ask the Duke of St. Hilda to marry you. It won't be long before you can just be the hostess of the Red Castle. I don't know if it is because of the man's words or because of the warm embrace. The girl's body gradually becomes soft and boneless, and the whole person is trapped in the arms of Colin. Colin, even if the adoptive father does not agree with our marriage, I will not leave you, Vera said firmly. Colin smiled and tightened the soft and slender waist of the girl, and promised, "Don't worry, I will let the Duke agree with our marriage. Their marriage must be recognized by the Duke, otherwise, Vera followed him to elope, which is obviously not the result of the greater ambition. However, in the current situation, the Duke of St. Hilda seems to be really unwilling to marry Vera to Colin. Benjian City has waited for more than 2 months in the Winter City, and still has not been involved in the Duke. Therefore, this time Colin took the initiative of Baron to kill chickens and monkeys. By the way, let the son of the Baron go to the Winter City to try it out to see if the Duke of St. Hilda is really seriously injured and unable to see it, or deliberately dragged him away. The messenger of Benjian City. If the Duke really meets the people of the Longba family and does not see the messenger of Benjian City, then Clearing will redevelop the next plan. If you don't want to give me, then I will grab it. Feeling some changes in men's bodies, Vera suddenly broke free from Colin's arms, and shifted the topic. Colin, are you hungry? Let's go for breakfast. Okay, Colin smiled narrowly, understanding that the girl may not be able to calm down from last night's madness. With Vera's help, Colin quickly dressed and then walked towards the restaurant together. After a rich breakfast, Vera proposed to go to Benjian City to stroll around. Colin would naturally not oppose it. Today is just a rare and good weather. The warm sun is hung in the sky, which slightly dispels the severe cold of winter. Colin and Vera worked hand in hand on the streets of Benjian City, but did not cause much movement. This is not the people of Benjian City disrespectful to their lords, but Colin and they deliberately hide their identities. Colin wore a large triangular hat and covered most of her face, while Vera wore a black gauze to restore the image of Colin's first time when she saw her. The guards followed the two far away, and there was no big fan. Colin, the slaves in your territory are different from what I saw before. Where is different? Vera tilted his head and looked at the slaves who focused on labor and said. The slaves I saw in the Winter City are all lazy without the leather whip of the supervisor, they would rather even lie on the ground to the sun. But the slaves in your territory are different, even if there is no leather whip, it is very motivated. Do you know what's the reason? Vera groaned for a moment, still shook her head, saying that she couldn't figure out. Because I gave them hope. Hope. Yes, Khalil described the integration system he implemented in Benjian City again. Wyra thought for a while, and nodded. It is really a great way. However, Colin, don't you worry about the fewer and fewer slaves in your men. 10 places per month only generate 120 free people in 1 year. Even 100 years later, it was only 10,000 slaves to be qualified to become free people. But in this process, the wealth created by slaves has far exceeded the value of more than 10,000 slaves itself. What's more, in the situation in the northern border, isn't I still worried about lack of slaves? Vera thought about it, and said at the point, Clorin, you are a kind and wise lord. Colin laughed, and suddenly he lamented. Such an exploitation method can still be called kindness. For a while, he didn't know whether he should be happy or lamented. After visiting a few neighborhoods, a group of children attracted Vera's attention. On the size of a basketball court, an old gentleman who looked about 50 years old gathered hundreds of children in front of him. 13 or 4 years old, only 4 or 5 years old. The only thing in common is that they are wearing worn clothes on their bodies and iron rings on their feet. This is a group of slaves. The old gentleman wrote a charcoal on a wall, and then led the slave children to read aloud. Colin, is this also arranged by you? Yes. Vera turned to look at Colin and was eager. Colin's image at this time became extremely tall. But what she didn't know was that Colin just felt that these slave children were too weak and could not do a lot of work. It was better to let people sweep them blindly. In this way, when they grew up, they could also become more valuable labor. At this moment, an old voice suddenly sounded. Lord, for people with a low identity, knowledge is not a blessing, but a curse. Colin turned around and saw an old priest standing behind the two. This chapter is finished. The original vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 191. Chapter 191. In this magical medieval world, knowledge is a valuable wealth. Not to mention slaves, that is, civilians generally have no chance to contact such wealth. Naturally, the nobles do not have to worry about this. They have a large number of books in their castles, as well as specialized tutors responsible for the education of noble children. But the words of civilians are very difficult to learn. There are two main ways they want to master knowledge. The first way is the church. Churches in various places will set up schools for civilian children to read, but here, the children learned are basically theological knowledge. In addition to being instilled how to serve the gods, why do they serve the gods and the truth of the gods and use it? It is basically impossible to learn how much. The second way is nobles. That's right, nobles will also recruit some civilian children as their children's reading. However, such a quota is very rare, and generally only leaves the descendants of their own family members. After mastered the knowledge, these family members can better serve their lords. In fact, there is still a third way, that is, the Empire Bida College. But don't talk about civilians in this channel, it is difficult for nobles to contact. Because the conditions for enrollment of Bida College are simple and harsh, they do not look at their identities, they only look at talent. Only children who are well funded can enter Bida College for free whether they are noble or civilians. However, the entire glorious empire has only one Bida College. The students recruited each year are only 2 digits. Those who can graduate smoothly are rare. Therefore, most civilians may be illiterate all their lives, let alone those low slaves. However, this may be what the rulers want to see. The first Pope Peter Messer crowned the Glory Empire once said a famous saying. The ignorance mind is easier to fill up loyalty and faith. The muddy civilians and slaves can facilitate the rule of church and nobles. Bishop Rongziu, do you think I shouldn't let people tell these slave children knowledge? Colin didn't worry about his behavior that would lead to the dissatisfaction of the church. After all, the church was not prohibited in this regard. Of course, this is because there are generally no lords to teach knowledge to slave children. No, Lord, how do you govern the people in the territory? I have no right to interfere. Bishop Rongziu said a gift towards Colin and said with a smile. Then he gave a gift to Wei, apparently recognizing her identity. Colin's eyes flickered, Bishop Rongziu could recognize himself. He was not too surprised. After all, he had repeatedly dealt with the other party, and his current disguise was not tight. But how did Bishop Rongziu recognize Vera? How did he know that Vera came to Binjian City? I am afraid that some people in the Red Castle revealed the information of Vera to the church. Although the news of Villa in Binjian City did not conceal it deliberately, the feeling of being penetrated into a sieve was still uncomfortable. However, he currently does not have a good way for the church. Faith is an extremely serious thing for people in this world. If you have to choose one between the Lord and the God, most of the people will still choose the gods. The nobles can only accept this. At the beginning, in Union City, Colin deliberately planted the seeds of hate church in the heart of Prince Harrison. In addition to trying to find some trouble for the St. Lorano family as a counterattack, I also wanted to testify how powerful the church's true power is. Essence. Seeing this, Vera had to mention the skirt, bend back, and then asked, Bishop Rongziu, why did you just say that knowledge may be a curse? Miss Willa, Of course, knowledge will not be a curse for you, but for these low-identity slaves, knowledge can make them clearly recognize their situation, and thus fall into despair. What is the pain of pain? What is the curse? Varamuran. Colin sneered in his heart. Obviously it is the trick of fools, but in the mouth of this bishop, it seems to have become a humanistic care of compassion. It seems that not allowing slaves to contact knowledge can be eliminated by their pain. Although the belly in my heart is slander, the surface of Colin has made a look of realization. Ah, the bishop, you are so right. Fortunately, you remind me, otherwise I am afraid I really have a bad thing. Master Viscount, you are heavy. Seeing the young lord who took the initiative to admit his mistakes, Bishop Rongzio showed the expression of the sister-in-law on his face. In fact, your approach is not wrong, no, but don't forget to spread the glory of the Lord. Colin understood the true intention of Bishop Rongzio. This is to brainwash these slave children. In fact, Colin had deliberately omitted theology of theology when arranging the teacher to give these slave children's blindness, and replaced it. It is to instill the concept of loyalty to the Lord's to these slave children. Unexpectedly, it was noticed by the church. Of course, it should be the glory of these slaves to bathe the Lord. Clorin smiled as usual. Okay, I will arrange a few priests to help you teach these slaves. Thanks to the help of the bishop's extended assistance, Colin could only nod. Although he is afraid of the church, Colin will not take the initiative to provoke at this time. He also hopes that the Harrison prince of the St. Lorenzo family can be the hero of the charge at the front of the church, and he himself, shake the flag behind and shout. Seeing the purpose, Bishop Rongzio nodded with satisfaction, and then said, Lord, there is something to tell you. You please tell me. Next month, I will be transferred away from Binjian City, but you can rest assured that a new bishop will come to take over my position. Oh, I wonder where you are going to be transferred. Winter City. There was a wave of waves in the eyes of Bishop Rongzio. Congratulations, Colin smiled. Bishop of the Winter City is obviously rising compared to Bishop City. Bishop Rongzio also smiled and humbled a few words, but the joy on his face could not be concealed. Bishop of the Winter City is generally a popular candidate for the Bishop of the Baidan Diocese. Therefore, the real core high rise of the Bishop Rongzio's distance into the church is one step away. I don't know where Jianji was now transferred, Villa suddenly asked. The Jin in her mouth was the Bishop of the Winter City. Bishop Rongzio was sorrowful and sighed, Bishop Jin has returned to the arms of the Lord. Huayra was taken aback and quickly apologized and mourned. Colin saw a little unnatural from the face of Bishop Rongzio, and then asked. Ask the Liberty, why did Bishop Jin die? As far as I know, Bishop Jin died of illness. He died of illness? At this time? Colin dares to be sure that the death of this Bishop of Jin must be a little strange. If you think about it, the Duke of St. Hilda was injured in the duel with the samurai of the Dahais, and it was most likely the treatment of him. But he died at this time? What secrets are hidden in this? What is the situation in the Winter City? One by one, doubts emerged in Khalil's brain, which made him unknowingly come out. This chapter is finished.